thinking that we are recording. I was going to announce that, so it just began. I'm going to split it into three sections. So the first section will be on the 501c3/6 differences, nuances, etc. And that will be led by our SPJ attorney, Mark Balin. Second section of our webinar will be just an overview of treasurer's responsibilities by our interim executive director, Jennifer Royer. Jennifer, if you could wave. Thank you. And then third section will be a little bit about regional funds. And one of our regional coordinators, Jennifer Ellis, has agreed to step up and explain that for us all. So maybe we can leave some time for questions at the end of each segment. I think that would be a good way to go. And again, we're going to try our best to keep it to an hour. All right, are we ready to roll? And we're going to start with Mark Balin, our SPJ attorney. Mark, take it away.
So, okay, thank you, Claire, and hello, everyone. Good evening or good afternoon, as it may be. So, yeah, I was asked to talk a little bit about tax status, the 501c3 or C6 status, and I'm happy to do that. But before I do, I thought I would just take a step back and talk a little bit about sort of the corporate organization, because SPJ is a fairly unique animal in this space in terms of how it's organized, because we have the national organization, which is a corporation, a nonprofit corporation organized and with a tax exempt status under 501c6. We then have the foundation, the SPJ Foundation, now it's called, it used to be SDX, but now it's the SPJ Foundation, is a 501c3. It's also essentially a national organization, although both the SPJ Association and the foundation are incorporated in the state of Illinois. Then, pursuant to Article 5 of the SPJ bylaws, we can have all of these chapters formed or communities formed, and they are typically formed in either cities or regions in the country, metropolitan areas or states. And they can be given charters by the SPJ National, and they can conduct their own affairs, as you well know, because that's what you're all doing. But interestingly enough, too, the SPJ bylaws do not dictate how you organize in terms of your corporate organization or lack thereof. And so there are a bunch of different ways to go. And over the course of SPJ's history, there have been unincorporated, and there still are unincorporated associations. There are corporations, nonprofit corporations, typically, I think almost exclusively formed almost under 501c6, just like the national organization is. And then in certain instances, there have been entities that chapters have created under 501c3, which we'll discuss in a moment, has the special benefit of being able to accept tax-deductible donations and can be used as a fundraising vehicle. And some chapters have formed entities that essentially do that, and that's what the SPJ National Foundation does, which is it's a 501c3 and it accepts donations and raises money through tax-deductible donations. But to start, Jennifer, if you could just pull up I just want to talk briefly about the unincorporated association, because some of you may be familiar with that because that's what your chapter is. And then for folks who aren't familiar with it, okay, I think that's the last page, Jennifer. If you could just go to the first page of the document. Okay, there we go. Perfect. So unincorporated associations are essentially when two or more people come together to work towards a common goal. And if the goal is for a social or public good or service, then the association is considered to be an unincorporated nonprofit association. And that is generally what SPJ chapters are. The benefit of unincorporated associations is that it can be very informal. You don't need to have any paperwork filed with the state, although Some states do have required some type of filings and so forth. So you should check with your specific state law. But typically, you do not have to have the formal bylaws and articles of incorporation or articles of formation that corporations have. And so it can be very easy to conduct. You don't have to worry about fees, paying filing fees or annual reports with the state. And it's just an easy way to operate. You don't get some of the benefits, though, of course, of corporations. And the benefits, one of the major benefits of a corporation is the limited liability. In other words, if the entity, if the unincorporated association does something and someone's upset about it and they want to, come after you, they will typically, they have to sue the individuals who are involved personally, because the unincorporated association can't be sued or sue. So a corporation, though, can be, and as a board member or a member of a nonprofit, you typically would have protections from liability. So that's the benefits of the unincorporated association. If you go the corporate route, typically what you will do is you will want to have a nonprofit status as a corporation. And the most common nonprofit status is what's called the IRS 501c6 designation. And that covers trade associations and professional associations. The IRS calls them business leagues. And it's essentially where folks who are in the same profession come together to do things to promote the common interest of that line of business. And the key here, of course, is that you are doing things, to improving the business of the overall trade and business, not that you're doing something that specifically will inure to the benefit of an individual or a company itself. So it has to, essentially do things that will be beneficial overall. And that's frankly, I think, right on the mark with respect to what SPJ does in terms of a professional organization where you have professionals who belong to the organization and are coming together to do things to help promote the organizations or the field that we're in, journalism, help promote things for journalists and journalism and so forth. And you can do things, you have a lot of leeway with a 501c6 to try to influence public policy. You can engage in lobbying, you can advocate for different public policies without having the IRS basically care too much. They do take notice, though, if you do hire lobbyists, if your chapter wants to hire a lobbyist and incur actual lobbying expenses that way, you do need to be somewhat careful about that, and probably will need to have that reviewed when you file your Form 990, which is the annual, essentially, IRS filing that you would do. So that's the common thing that most chapters, if they are incorporated, will go the 501c6 route. Recently, a lot of people have been talking about the fact that journalism in particular has in the media, the news media industry has been struggling financially, and that there's a lot of companies now that have switched to nonprofit status. And so there's been a push for perhaps changing some of the corporate organization and tax exemption policies to go to the 501c3 route. And the 501c3 route, which is is this other form of tax exemption, which Jennifer, if you scroll down, I think the next slide should be or actually there's a little bit more on 501c6. One thing let me just finish this one thought before we get to the 501c3. A couple of points on 501c6 that people might not recognize is that that you can potentially deduct your expenses, like membership fees can potentially be deductible for a member to a 501c6. And I think that's sometimes overlooked. It may not be, if you're an employee of a company, then you probably can't deduct it. But if you have your own company, for instance, and one of the benefits that you want to do, if you have a LLC, or if you're, a freelancer that is being paid through 1099s, check with your tax advisor, because you potentially could be deducting your fees and other expenses in relation to SPJ as a 501c6. So I just wanted to throw that in there too. And of course, if you do any fundraising through your chapter, the IRS does have a provision that says that if you're soliciting donations, that you should be putting on your flyers or your emails or something to you give notice to the fact that it's not a tax deductible donation, not a tax deductible charitable donation. So that was the other things on 501c6. But moving to 501c3, so this is the organizations that are that are charitable, religious, educational, scientific, literary, and so forth, that can be formed. And I highlighted educational here because that's clearly, I think, the one that will apply to folks here. And the benefit, of course, of the 501c3 is that you can solicit donations, and the donor can deduct those donations on their taxes. Like I'm sure many of you do when you donate to charities, you get a tax deduction. And so there's been a push, a lot of journalism organizations, most recently the News Leaders Association, which is the successor organization to the American Society of Newspaper Editors. They've converted their 501c6 status to a 501c3 status. And they actually combined their foundation, which was already a 501c3, with their 501c6, which is now a 501c3. And then other organizations that are in the journalism space that started, more recently, have actually opted to just go the 501c3 route. And so I think there have been some people at the chapter level who are saying, "Hey, is this something we should consider?" And I think that it sounds, great on paper in some respects, and it sounds great in terms of, or conceptually rather, but there are a lot more restrictions and hurdles that you have to go through. You actually have to get the IRS to approve it. And a lot of times people will apply for 501c6 status with the IRS, but in truth, the IRS has a provision that you don't even have to apply for 501c6 status. You can just conduct your affairs in conformance with 501c6, and then you can just declare yourself 501c6 compliant and be a 501c6 organization. But for a 501c3, you do have to get a formal IRS approval. You have to fill out what's called Form 1023, which is and I think, Jennifer, if you keep scrolling, I think I do list all this in the slides. You have to file the 1023, which is a 12-page form, and then it takes up to 6 months to a year for the IRS to review it and approve it. And so there's a lot, and then there's obviously the filing, the collecting money and filing the Form 990s, which reflect the funds that have been collected and so forth. Can be a bit more complicated. The key thing, of course, for the 501c3 is that you need to ensure that it's for educational purposes that have a public benefit. So the 501c6, if you're doing stuff that is benefiting journalists and the profession, that's sufficient. But if you do things for just that benefit journalists or the profession alone, it technically is, it shouldn't fall under C6. It shouldn't fall under C3. So you got to be careful to make sure that the programming that you do has a broader appeal and it has an educational purpose. And if you fall into just doing things that would benefit journalists or journalism or the profession of journalism, technically the IRS could come down on you on that. Now, I know this is being recorded, But I will say that the IRS in the last 5 to 10 years has not been aggressively pursuing organizations that are in 501c3 that are doing things that, again, that have at least an educational purpose behind it. They're not being audited and so forth. So there have been in some of the restrictions on lobbying and so forth have been loosened a little bit, which a 501c3 is not supposed to really be engaged in lobbying. However, they do allow, if it's a very small portion of the overall organization's goals and mission, to allow some lobbying. So the IRS has been more lenient, and so you're seeing more organizations going the 501c3 route because they can send out those solicitations and seek funding from people who want to make tax deductible donations. So basically, the bottom line is, I think if your organization, if you're in a chapter or a region that's been incorporated, it's most likely a C6. If you are thinking that we want to raise money, I think there are two ways to and use through tax deductible donations. There's at least two ways to go there. One is to see if you can, form or convert to a C3, or forming, and then some chapters have done this where they form a special vehicle, which is a C3 usually for a specific purpose too, if they're doing a certain fundraising drive. So you can go that route as well. Generally, though, I don't think it's a great idea to do unless you think there's really going to be a source of income, so to speak, a donation source coming in for this, because again, the work that SPJ does and the chapters do really falls pretty squarely within the C6 exemption, and that seems to be the it seems to be really what SPJ is doing. And so if there's a need to go the other route, I would say, feel free to reach out to us, to talk to us about it first before you do anything major in that area. So in any event, that's just a brief overview. As I said, if you do have questions or specifics, or you have something in mind and you want to run it by us, by all means, feel free to do so.
Yeah, maybe we can just take a few moments for questions about 501c issues. Anybody? I'm going to look around, and Jennifer could help me with hands. If you could use your hand icon, that would be great. I don't think I see any questions.
I have a question, Claire.
Dan Kubisky, please, from the international community.
Well, also treasurer of the DC chapter.
Good.
In all of this, there's also you have the employee identification number, and there was a letter sent out like 40 years ago saying that the chapters have access to that number when we're doing filings. Is there any way we can get a new letter, with a date that's sometime in this century?
Okay, so I think you're referring to the SPJ Nationals Employer and Identification Number, EIN number?
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, and I don't think DC is actually incorporated, right? Are you guys not incorporated?
We're not incorporated. We do,
yeah,
all the simplest forms possible.
Right. So yeah, so I think you're referring to the fact that the IRS, any corporation that is formed in any state, and again, you'll first form your corporations in a state, but then you can apply to the IRS to get a employer identification number, an EIN, and then any tax related filings and things like that will be done in connection with that EIN. However, if you are not a incorporated entity, you cannot get an EIN. And so I think for some of the unincorporated associations in the past, they've used the the national EIN. So we can look into that, Dan. I'm not familiar with that letter. I think probably predates my time if it was 40 years ago. But
I think it's right around the time I joined. Okay, so we had a long time.
so I'll check in with that. I'll check on that and see if there's something that can be done to.
Okay, you had also mentioned that depending on the state laws, obviously, not having to file fees, not having to file paperwork with states. Washington, DC, I just to have us hold on to the name SPJ, Washington, DC, et cetera, they have a filing for organizations. And that's separate than a corporate filing fee?
It probably is, yes. I think that, as I said, some states do have, for unincorporated associations, still require some filings. And so you have to just check. And so it sounds like DC probably does. I know California does too. I've heard that they have certain requirements. But I think there are other states that don't.
Okay, so not a scam. Okay.
Here's a question in the chat. Can a 501c3 local chapter send or join in on occasional position statements from the broader news industry sent to legislators if it is an infrequent activity, or does this trigger a problem? No, I don't think it would trigger a problem if it's infrequent, if it's not constant, and if that's not your raison d'etre, is to write letters to legislators. If you're just joining on the occasional one that affects the interests, then no, I think that wouldn't be a problem. And SPJ, SPJ is a C6. I mean, obviously it joins a lot. SPJ National joins a lot of letters and joins a lot of amicus briefs and so forth. But as a C3, they can join those as well. Again, infrequent, or a couple of times a month or something like that, as opposed to every day or every week.
Thank you to both of you. Let me go to Michael Drudge.
Yes, hi, this is Michael Drudge. I'm president of the San Antonio Pro Chapter. We are 501c6, as I understand it, because we derive our status from the national SPJ. But at times we do an annual gridiron show to raise money for scholarships, and we have had potential donors turn us down because we are not 501c3. And I've been wondering, I've heard that perhaps the foundation, SPJ Foundation, could accept donations on our behalf and then remit the money to us with some sort of a commission charge. Do you know anything about that? How does that process work, if it's true?
Yeah, no, I don't think we have a formal process for that. And you certainly can direct donors to the SPJ Foundation, but in terms of them, simply doing holding it as a fundraiser for you, in order for them to send the money back to the C6, to your organization, it would have to fit certain parameters, like for an educational program, it could be a grant for some type of training or educational thing. It couldn't come back to you just to sort of cover general overhead expenses. So it's possible it can be done, but there would be restrictions on how those funds were used.
Yeah, I understand. We would use this money for scholarships for student journalists in the San Antonio region. That's what we do. Our gridiron show,
Okay,
that's its purpose.
Yeah, well, then that's definitely a charitable purpose. And so, yeah, I would check with Hagit Lamore now as the chair of the foundation, and I would check with Hagit about whether you can set something up with them on that.
Matt, have you considered setting up your own SDX Foundation? Because we have our own in Washington, and a portion of our dues automatically goes to the foundation. Plus we do fundraising, and that's a 501c3, completely separate board and everything. I mean, it's a big pain in the butt to do it, but it's been very successful for us.
Yeah, we do too.
Yeah.
Fort
The
Worth,
big
we've
pain,
got a
the big
separate
pain in
account.
the butt thing is why we've not gotten into it. I've tried to reach out from time to time in ways to streamline the process, but it looks like a lot of hurdles. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, I'm just going to keep us moving along.
Can I have excuse me, can I ask one question to Mark?
Yes, Kay, please do.
Okay, we had, we're having our, I started to say gridiron, we're having our scholarship, and we had to fill out some paper and for who we were, and they wanted our TIN number, and Kim, who's working on this, went to National, and she said they have a TIN number. I said, well, isn't that the same as an EIN number? We here at the local council, we have an EIN number, which is our corporate number. What's the difference?
That's a good question. I mean, the TIN, I believe, stands for Taxpayer Identification Number. And it could be either the EIN number, or it could be a social security number, or it could be for international people, I think, other numbers. So I think it's the same number. If that's what they're looking for, is essentially the EIN. And I think they just called it the TIN, but it should be the same.
The
Well,
only
Kim's-
time I've seen a TIN being called for is when you're paying the person you're paying. You want the TIN of the person being paid or the entity being paid.
Well, she said, oh, excuse me, she said because we are a sub chapter of National, we had to use, and she got it from somebody, we had to use their EIN number. And we've got our own.
Yeah. No, yeah, you can use your own, but
Well, what does that mean if we use your number? I can't see using your number if we've got a tax ID number and have had it for whatever, 75 years the chapter has been around.
right. Yeah, you should be able to use your own EIN number.
Okay.
So.
Okay, I don't see other hands, and I do want to move us to the next segment. Mark, that was very informative. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm putting my email address in the chat. If you have any further questions for Mark, our attorney, you could reach out through me or through Jennifer Royer, our interim executive director. Jennifer, if you could put your email also in the chat so that everybody here tonight has it. And perhaps we could do some other session, Mark, I'll talk to you offline about, just questions for our attorney, which I think, probably would be helpful if we made you accessible every once in a while with a meeting like this for our members with some kind of legal questions. I'm thinking about that as an idea. So, but anyway, thank you, everybody. Okay, we're going to move
Happy
on.
to see you. I'm going to jump off, Claire, if that's okay.
That's fine.
All
Thank you.
right. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to Jennifer Royer now, who's going to give an overview of the treasurer's responsibilities.
Bear with me. I'm moving windows and sharing screens, and here we go. So this PowerPoint was put together specifically for pro chapters, but campus chapters are very similar in some of the things that they need to do. So there's a slide at the end that just gives a few of the differences between the two. So we can look at that toward the end, but just keep in mind that a lot of this applies to campus chapters as well. And after the presentation, the recording is done, we're going to email that to you all so you have the recording to refer back to, and then also some other materials that be helpful just for reference later on. So, okay, so, well, why isn't there we go. Okay, what's my role? What are my responsibilities? I will try not to read this whole thing to you, by the way, but we'll go over the highlights. As a board member of a local SPJ chapter, your responsibility is to ensure fiscal responsibility of the chapter's funds. And that is in our bylaws, Article 5, Section 12 of the SPJ bylaws, and those can be found on the website, spj.org. So The treasurer shall produce all financial records of the chapter for inspection upon demand from the executive director, national officer, or the chapter's regional coordinator. I'm gonna have to move. I minimize this. Here we go. Okay. The treasurer shall also make prompt and proper report of the chapter's financial condition to the SPJ executive director, and shall have charge of all monies of the chapter and disperse funds after proper authorization. And they shall keep records of all receipts, disbursements, and balances. So failure to meet these financial obligations or otherwise to conduct yourself according to the bylaws or policies adopted by the board or the National Convention, a chapter may be declared probationary, inactive, or have its charter revoked by majority vote of the board of directors. Any such decision may be appealed to the full convention under the written charter, revocation, and probation policies of the board of directors. Oh. Income and expenses. So if you spend under $100, you must have authorization from at least one board member other than the treasurer. If you spend $101 or more, you must get approval of at least 2 officers. A majority vote of the board is required for any expenditure over $200 in person or electronic. And this kind of mirrors what we do at headquarters as well. If the executive director needs to spend more than $5,000 that isn't already budgeted, then they have to get approval of the board for that as well. So, staying financially safe. Income and expenditures must remain separate in your records. We strongly discourage using cash, limit it as much as possible, and avoid debit cards unless your state law bans the use of credit cards by the chapter. Debit cards are too easily abused. And I would say if you use credit cards, well, I think there's a slide later that addresses this, but setting some like restrictions on your credit card usage too is also helpful. Here we go. If a credit card is necessary, check with your bank to see if you can restrict the card's use for large expenses only. I would also recommend seeing if you can restrict the card's use as like for cash advances at an ATM. That just makes it really too easy to access your credit line. Transfer funds from your PayPal account to the chapter's general account after each event where the PayPal account was used. If the board votes on a money matter directly affecting a board member other than reimbursements, that board member should recuse themselves and leave the room to allow full and frank discussion. When depositing funds in the chapter bank account, use a for deposit only rubber stamp or write for deposit only on the back of the checks. Keeping records, a check stub, a copy, or a computer record of each check written with a detailed breakdown of specific amounts for various purposes should be kept. Electronic and printed copies of monthly bank statements, receipts, each notated with the check number or other record of payment information for annual chapter report to national is also important. I've learned too in my role as interim ED that you can never keep too much information when you're writing a check or paying for something. You can never have too much information because it just makes it easier to look something up or figure out what some random expense was down the road. So keep good records. The SPJ annual report, there's a financial section. And so chapters federal and state tax records should be there. The employer ID number, we've talked about that. And a letter verifying tax exempt status. So that goes back to what I was talking about. Review your documents so you know your chapter status. A report is due quarterly to the regional coordinators, and this includes income and expenses, bank and credit card statements. The same information also will be required for each chapter's annual report. There's a monthly report to the chapter board detailing income and expenses and sharing bank statements. It's required even if the board does not meet monthly. And then you file the financial section of your annual report to national, and then annual forms 990, Easy 990, or eCard 990 with the IRS. and any state or local forms required of nonprofits and tax-exempt organizations. We recommend keeping these records in a single 3-ring binder as well as on your computer. You also can never have too many backups. Okay. Per the chapter finance rules, each regional coordinator or chapter president will arrange for a training session for a new chapter treasurer. The training shall occur within 30 days of the president or treasurer assuming that position. Any other board member authorized to disperse funds may go through the training, and chapter presidents are encouraged to be trained. Accountability. You must make your bank accounts transparent to your officers and regional coordinators. Provide copies of bank statements with read-only access to bank accounts or through money management programs. While the chapter president and treasurer have direct access to the account, at least one other board member and the regional coordinator must have read-only access. As board members leave the board or discontinue as officers, the treasurer must review who has check signing privileges and alert the board if they need to make changes. This change may require the treasurer to correct the signature cards that the bank has on file for the organization's bank account. This is also very important as you have people come on and leave the board, update the names of the authorized users of those bank accounts. It's really important or you'll get locked out of your account. And it takes a lot of time to get those things updated. Chapters must comply with financial record reporting rules within 3 months or they lose the ability to apply for chapter grants. If chapters don't comply with the financial record reporting within 6 months, they're ineligible for national awards, will not be awarded delegates for the national convention, and won't be able to receive new chapter dues. National headquarters would hold a chapter's dues until that chapter is compliant. If chapters don't comply with financial record reporting rules within 1 year, the national board may revoke the charter. Budgeting. Create an annual budget. Preparing a budget can help your chapter plan for the year. A budget approved at the beginning of the year can eliminate the need to approve some individual expenditures throughout the year. And then some special things to remember if you are part of a campus chapter. Signatories include the chapter president, the treasurer, and the advisor. If a chapter is not affiliated with a university, a faculty member or advisor needs to be the backup signatory, and a backup of records should be shared with the advisor as well. These rules were adopted by the SPJ Board of Directors in 2018. I'm also going to send you a pro chapter FAQ. There's also a campus chapter FAQ. And if you have questions, you can always email us at membership@spj.org or call 317-920-8000, or you're welcome to email me, J Royer, JROYER, @spj.org. That is it on the treasurer training.
Thank you, Jennifer. There was a question in the chat from Tim Igo of Phoenix. Could you tell us which of these guidelines are new? I'm sure, I think you kind of answered the question with your last slide, that they've all been in place since 2018. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, I don't believe there's been any updates since then.
Okay. Good question anyway. Tim, do you have another question? I see your, oh, is that a thumb up or a hand up?
Sorry, Claire, that was a thumb up. Perfect.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jennifer Royer?
Yes, I'm seeing the questions in the chat. We will send
Oh.
you the slide deck and Mark's presentation. We'll send all of that to you.
Okay, Michael Whitney, must quarterly report to regional be compiled of 3 months, or are the monthlies okay? Michael, do you want to clarify a little bit?
We have monthly reports, which include the details of that. I'm seeing the regional needs quarterlies. I'm asking if I have to now produce my compiles the 3 into quarterly. You guys send them the report you'll see each month.
Okay, so you're breaking up a little bit, so it's good that you put your question in the chat. Jennifer, can you address that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's fine either way you want to do it. We don't want to make things overly complicated and difficult. So I think as long as all the information's there, it's fine if it's just month by month or the whole quarter. I think just whatever your board prefers would be fine.
Okay, good. He says he prefers monthly, so problem solved. That's good. Okay, I'm just looking around the room here.
Claire,
SK,
I've been the treasurer since probably 2000. And the only reports I've ever given were our annual reports. And I give you a copy of every one of our statements. Our bank accounts don't change much. And we hold the Region 8 under our banking account. Since all that trouble happened a couple years ago, we oversee the Region 8 bank account. But like I said, that never changed. We haven't had any money in or out of it for 4 or 5 years. But our regular banking account kind of goes in and out. But I've never done a quarterly. And I've never had anybody tell me any different, like, uh-oh, you're not sending us this. So what I've got so much work to do for this chapter, you can't believe. So.
and you've been doing it for 23 years.
Yep. Yep.
Do you know the answer to that at all, about the quarterlies?
Or monthlies, I mean.
I think and maybe Jennifer Ellis can correct me if I'm wrong because she's an RC, but I think the RCs should be maybe reaching out if you don't produce those for them quarterly. But I'm sure, everybody's busy and I'm sure not everybody does it. I think as long as you are in communication with your RC and there aren't any issues, if you don't have a lot of money going in and out, I don't think it'll be an issue. But I guess we should talk to the RCs to maybe make sure they're reminding you all that they really need these reports.
Jennifer?
Well, oh, excuse me.
I think that a couple of years ago when John had given us this training, I think we all agreed that monthly and quarterly reports were a little cumbersome, and that generally the annual reports is where the regional coordinators look at all of the accounts. However, I think that it's in there because if there is ever a question, we could make a quarterly ask for these things.
Well, in our board meeting, one of the reasons that I asked about a couple years ago when we were down in San Antonio with Michael and down there, I said, why don't you guys let Fort Worth look after this bank account? Because we have a board meeting every month and I put out the statements to every account we've got. And so you've got 13 people every month looking over these statements. And if there's 1 penny out of pocket, they question it. So I think it's very safe that we take care of this. Plus, it keeps us from, say, we just changed regional coordinators, Laura Garcia. So if we had to move that bank account down there, then when you change the regional coordinator, then you move it to another bank. It's so stupid. And it just, this way we can take care of it. And again, it hasn't had any money in or out of it for about 4 or 5 years since the other guy was there. So I think an annual report with all, because I make copies of all of this stuff and with our income tax statements and everything, and I send it to National. So they've got a copy of everything we do every month.
All right, thank you, Kay.
Yeah.
Appreciate those insights. And let me go up to Michael Drudge.
Yeah, I kind of echo what Kay said. I had never heard of this requirement before. I think you're referring though to each chapter in the region. For example, all the chapters in Region 8 should send a 3-month report to our regional coordinator, who's now Laura Garcia. And I suppose Laura works with Kay on the overall Region 8 account when and if it needs to be audited or reviewed. So,
Right.
but that's a new, I guess it's been around since 2018, but I had not heard of this before. And so I would recommend SPJ make sure chapter presidents and treasurers who may not be on this chat today know about this and can fulfill this requirement. Thanks.
Good tip. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Dan Kibisky.
Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate that our regional coordinators in our monthly meetings, and our bylaws require me to submit monthly financial reports, even though like so many other places, our money, goes in and out, within a really set zone. Yeah, I didn't know about these quarterly things either. I was kind of not wanting to burden Stephanie with a whole lot more emails and paperwork.
Okay, maybe some more of these questions will be answered when we hand the program over to Jennifer Ellis, who is Regional Coordinator of Region 12. And she's joining us. Maybe you could go over the regional funds first, Jennifer, and then if we want to circle back, if anybody has additional comments or questions about the other topic.
Sure. So just initially, I guess, what are regional funds? And the short answer for that is that there are funds available to the regional coordinators to support members and chapters in their region and just the overall mission of SPJ. Not every region has a regional fund, though. There are several regions who have no money. If your region does have a regional fund, it's usually because of hard work and, of course, judicious spending and saving. Generally, the sources of the revenue for regional funds are like a journalism contest, gridiron shows, sometimes regions that have big regional conferences and have gotten lots of sponsorships. That could be another source. For example, like a region 12, which is my region, and Region 3, we have the annual Green Eyeshade Awards. And Region 3 does the work of the marketing and administrating of the contest, and Region 12 facilitates all the judging. And, that's with a swap with another journalism contest that's outside of our area. And then the proceeds from that are distributed based on the percentage of where the entries came from. And of course, that contest gives us each region a few $1,000s every year. And so contests take a lot of work. Not every region wants to take on that responsibility. There are a lot of contests out there too. So there are other ways to raise money. Perhaps your region could do an auction at a regional conference, or maybe a percentage of the regional conference fees could be split between the host chapter and the region. It's really up to the regional coordinator if you want to put lots of effort into making sure that your region has some money to work with. And then what the next question, I guess, is what those funds can be used for. And really anything that fulfills the SPJ's mission and is not for anyone's personal benefit, I think fits within the category. Some of the ways that I've used regional funds in Region 12 include like chapter grants for programs, regional conference expenses, SPJ promotional items like t-shirts and reporter notebooks and pens. And I've given scholarships to members in our region to attend SPJ conferences. And sometimes I've just tried to spread the money around so that, it can be put into the hands of people that can do things with it. So I've given grants to just any of the chapters that have filled out an annual report in that year. It's really up to your regional coordinator, but I would suggest if you're a chapter treasurer or chapter leader, if you have an idea, ask your regional coordinator if there's money available, and most often they will be happy to give you some. But let's be real clear though, regional funds are not to buy a round of beer at the conference or things like that. It's definitely to use for SPJ purposes. Regional coordinator could use it to travel within the region to, like for instance, I went to Tennessee when they had a historical marketplace there. And so each regional coordinator has like a $1,500 stipend for travel each year, but that generally only covers travel to the national convention. And so the regional fund can be used for things like that.
Excuse me, I've got a question. Okay, but now, so we don't have in Region 8, we don't have a whole lot of money. So is it up to the regional coordinator to decide what they want to use that money for? It's everybody's money, and I can't see if the regional coordinator says, okay, well, I'm going to travel over here and I'm going to use some of the money. Shouldn't everybody in the region have a say as to what that money is used for? Like we don't have very much. So if somebody was going to bring a speaker down for the conference, I could see that. Believe it or not, I don't know how many chapters are involved in Region 8. I know Houston and San Antonio and Fort Worth, and who else? I mean, I don't know who else is in our region.
I'm not sure about who all is in your region, but it is up to the regional coordinator to determine how the regional funds get spent. And how that works is if there's an expense that the regional coordinator wants to have expensed, they send a notice in writing to the regional treasurer, and then the regional treasurer, of course, give all the receipts and things, and then the regional treasurer would say whether that's being paid out. Since your chapter is acting as the regional treasurer, that's sort of your stopgap there of ensuring that the regional coordinator is spending those funds on appropriate things.
Well, and I'm regional treasurer. I just came back from San Antonio and had conferences with Laura Garcia, and we're on the same page, but it's just easy to have that bridge, from the region to the Fort Worth chapter. It's easy to do that. But I was wondering, it's like, I just think it's transparency that if the regional coordinator wanted to bring somebody in and say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to have to take all the money that we've got in the treasury out of it. I just think other people ought to say, well, could we find somebody local? Could we, I just can't see just helter skelter using all that money. I don't know what I'd use it for, but
well, that's why you definitely, that's why the regional coordinator position is an elected position, so that you are getting, and there should be communication between the chapters and the regional coordinators to know what sort of things are being expensed.
okay.
Jennifer, I do have a quick question. I was president of the Deadline Club for a couple of years, and I do remember that our regional coordinator asked us to contribute to the fund. That does happen in some regions, right? I guess with larger chapters that do have funds to contribute to it. Is that sort of an optional thing depending on the region?
Yeah, I have heard of that happening in regions where there wasn't any money in a regional fund. And I guess that would be up to the chapters if they wanted to opt in to do that. I don't see a problem with the regional coordinators asking for
And
for
just a quick
contribution.
quick follow-up question too, is it up to the regional coordinators where these regional funds are stored? You know, is it by region and different modes? Can you just?
Yes. So within 45 days of the regional coordinator's election, they're to appoint a regional treasurer. And then generally, you know, the bank has moved around. Like, for example, when before me was Kelly Kissel, and then before that there was someone in Tennessee, and so the bank account was in Tennessee. And so when Kelly was in Little Rock in Arkansas, and so he moved the account here with the regional treasurer at the time. And then we've just kept the account at the same place since it's local here. But regional.
I think that's smart. I think that's real smart not to drag that thing every time we change regional coordinators and have somebody look over it all the time.
Well, and then also the regional, there's something that you mentioned, Kate. The regional fund is supposed to be held in a separate regional account from, it's not supposed to be commingled at all with any chapter account or anyone else's personal account.
Right.
So I'm sure you guys have done that, but
Right.
So there are rules for the regional account. We're supposed to make our bank accounts also transparent with the SPJ National Secretary Treasurer. There are rules that we're supposed to send accountings to them quarterly as well. When we go back to that quarterly question, I've only ever been asked for them annually since I've been a regional coordinator, but they certainly could ask. And then the treasurer is supposed to keep all the records of electronic payments and receipts and things like that for at least 3 years. And that would cover like any crossover period, because the regional coordinator is elected for 2 years. And so, you know, there's always going to be at least that 1 year of the previous.
Yeah.
In that.
Good, super helpful. Thank you,
Yeah.
Yes.
Jennifer. Appreciate
And
it.
then, like I said, that those quarterly reports, those are supposed to be due March 30th, June 30th, September 30th, and December 31st. And let's
We
see.
have never done that. No one's asked us for that. I mean, I'll do it, but no one's ever asked us for that. So
I've never asked any of my chapters for it. I do a thorough looking every year when we do annual reports. To be honest, if you're a good regional coordinator and doing a lot of things, I don't know that you have time to do that every 3 months. But let me see if there was anything else on my list. Yeah, I had said already that the regional coordinators have to ask in writing for an expense to be paid. And of course, get all those itemized things. And then also kind of another rule that along with chapters is that the payouts should be done electronically and no cash payments. Handwritten checks are discouraged, but most chapters are using checks. So.
Yeah, that's how we do. I get a copy of the checks, and that's what I like. I mean, it's separate from everything else we do, but they send me in the mail, and then I can access them through our bank account if I need to. But I've got two places there where I can be transparent. I can be it in paper or online. So I've got something to back it up with.
And then also just any regional treasurer, if they're not satisfied that an expense is legitimate, they're supposed to immediately notify the national secretary treasurer. And so that's sort of the hierarchy of how that goes.
I see Megan, Megan in the chat is, she's not sure if her Region 9 has a fund. So to find that out, you would ask your regional coordinator, right? And
Yes.
if you're having trouble reaching out to your regional coordinator, please let Jennifer Royer at headquarters know. She'll put you in touch with your regional coordinator. Michael Drudge has a question, and I'm just watching the time, so we're going to try to take maybe 10 more minutes to wrap up. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, Jennifer Ellis, can I just clarify, when you refer to the annual report, it's the one that we send to SPJ National, and you regional coordinators get a copy of that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thanks.
That was a quick question. Thank you. I'm just checking
Yeah,
around.
kind of unusual for Matt, not Mike Drudge.
I'll forget we're recording. I think that I don't see any other questions, and thank you, Jennifer Ellis. That was super helpful. You covered all the questions that I had, so thank you. I guess this is a wrap. I want to thank you all again for coming. Jennifer Royer also for giving us her overview and for your excellent questions for tonight, but most of all, for all your service to the society, all your volunteer hours. Thank you so much. Questions in the chat? I'm looking iPhone. I think we got them, and I think Jennifer Royer answered a few, right? Do you see any others? Jennifer Royer?
Yeah, I didn't see any others.
Contest question. Oh, there's a contest, sort of, okay.
Yeah,
And-
I
go ahead.
answered it. Yeah, I just said I'll check to see if we have information at headquarters on administering contests. I don't know if we do. But I'd recommend connecting with another region that has a successful contest and getting ideas and advice from them. For sure, that might be better than anything we have at headquarters actually, but I will see what we have and include it in what we send.
Maybe Jennifer Ellis, could you put your email in the chat, please, in case anybody has a follow-up question about regional funds or even contest? You might have a good recommendation for that since you know all the other regional coordinators. That would be super helpful. So we'll just wait for Jennifer's email. And
Claire?
yes.
I just want to make a plug for an international community
Oh,
thing.
please
coming
do.
up. We've got an interview with an Israeli journalist on Tuesday, the 18th at noon, talking about the state of affairs, the media landscape in Israel, especially with a lot of the things that Netanyahu is doing. So all the information is in the SPJ calendar. It was in Leeds, I think, last week. Hopefully it'll be in tomorrow's as well. But please come. It's at noon Eastern time on Tuesday. And we've already got a good slew of students from Arizona State University signing up. I don't know why, but I'm happy for it.
Excellent plug. We wish you well with that program. Thank you, Dan. All right, with that, I think we are ready to conclude. Thank you again all for coming, and you will be hearing from Jennifer Royer with the recording and other materials. Thank you, everybody, again. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. It was great. Thank you.
Good.
Helpful.
Bye-bye.